What you're looking at right now was recorded 11 days before this video was published, less than 400 yards from a house where 3 children sleep. It is not enhanced, it is not stabilized. It hasn't been cropped, sharpened, or touched by software of any kind. This is exactly what came off the SD card of a 15-year-old trail camera strapped to a fir tree on a game trail somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. A camera that for years photographed nothing more interesting than deer, elk, and one very confused neighbor's dog. And then, at 2:04 in the morning, on a 39-degree night under a waning moon, it photographed this. A figure, upright, crossing the frame left to right, past a fir tree wider than a doorway, over 7 feet tall by every reference point in the picture. Shaggy gray-brown hair, longer at the shoulders and forearms, mud-stained at the legs, knees bent, head level, arms swinging low, and the head turning as it walks, scanning, alert, not fleeing, not posing, aware. And in one frame, just one, the flash catches the face, pale gray skin, a flat, broad nose, eyes that throw the light back. Then it steps behind the big tree, and the next frame is empty forest, like nothing was ever there. That's it. That's all of it. A few seconds, and I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. This video is not going to spend the next hour zooming and enhancing and drawing red circles on those frames. You've seen them now. You'll see them again at the very end, and I think by then they'll look different to you. Because the footage was never the story. The story is the man who recorded it. A man who begged us to hide his name, his town, his face, who doesn't want money, doesn't want fame, and frankly doesn't want any of this. A hunter, a father of 3, a man who 11 days before contacting us was a complete skeptic, and who is now living something that I can only describe as a quiet emergency that he is not allowed to tell anyone about. This is the story of what it's actually like when this thing, whatever it is, turns out to live next door. And by the end of it, I'm going to ask you a question that has been following me around for 2 weeks. Fair warning, it's going to follow you too. Let's meet him. The email arrived from an account created that same day. No name, no subject line, 1 attachment, and 3 sentences. I don't want money, I don't want to be found. I just need someone to tell me what this is. We get messages like this more often than you'd think, and most of them fall apart within 1 phone call. The story shifts, the details wobble. The sender suddenly remembers they'd like to be paid after all. That's usually how you know. This one didn't fall apart. It got worse, and I mean worse the way true things get worse, where every answer opens 2 more questions you wish you hadn't asked. We're going to call him Daniel. That's not his name. He's in his early 40s. He works a trade job in a small timber town in the Pacific Northwest. And that is as specific as we will ever get, so please don't ask in the comments. You'll understand why soon enough, and you'll agree. He's been married 15 years, 3 kids, 11, 8, and 6. I want to spend a minute on what kind of man this is because everything that follows rests on it. Daniel is not a Bigfoot guy. He has never watched a channel like this one. He's never read the books, never seen the documentaries, couldn't have told you what state the famous film was shot in. When I used the word Sasquatch on our first phone call, there was a pause on the line, and then he said quietly, "I'd rather you didn't call it that." Not because the word scared him, because the word embarrassed him. Because men like Daniel have spent their whole lives on one side of a line, the sensible side, the side that smiles politely at this stuff. And the photograph in his truck has thrown him over that line against his will, and he hasn't stopped falling since. Here's his life in the shape it had until 11 days before that email. A house and 40-some acres of timber that his grandfather bought when land out there cost what a used truck costs now. His father's ground, and his father's before that, paid off, no mortgage. That one fact is the load-bearing wall of the whole family. It's how a tradesman's wages stretch across 5 people, how his wife could stay home when the kids were small, why the freezer is full of elk. He killed himself a half-mile from his own back door. He has hunted that ground his entire adult life. He knows it the way you know a house in the dark, where the deer bed, where the elk cross, which drainage holds birds in October, where the creek goes shallow enough for kids. And that last part matters because the forest wasn't just his, it was the whole family's. Weekend hikes, a swimming hole a mile up the creek, a fort the 2 older kids spent an entire summer building out of deadfall. The 11-year-old learning to read deer sign on the same trails where Daniel learned it from his own father, which is a kind of inheritance that doesn't show up on any paperwork. And for a family that watches every dollar, understand, the forest was free. It was the vacation, the playground, the movie theater. It was where they were rich, 1 trail camera, old white flash, the kind they barely make anymore. He runs it on a game trail behind the property for exactly one reason, patterning deer before the season. He checks the card every 2 or 3 weeks. It's a ritual. Pull the card, pour a coffee, scroll 200 near-identical photos at the kitchen table while the kids argue about something in the next room. Deer, deer, raccoon, deer, branch in the wind, deer. That is the man, practical, private, rooted 4 generations deep. The kind of man who, if you showed him this video 2 months ago, would have watched 90 seconds of it, smiled, and gone back to sharpening a knife. Keep that man in your head. Now watch what happens to him. A Tuesday evening, kids fed, homework half done in the next room, his wife on the phone with her sister. Daniel pulls the SD card from his jacket. He'd swapped it that afternoon, pours the coffee, sits down, and starts scrolling. He told me he actually scrolled past it, thumb on autopilot, 200 photos deep into deer and darkness, and the burst sequence went by as a flash-lit blur, motion on a trail where motion means antlers. Something in the back of his brain pulled the emergency brake. He scrolled back. And here's the detail I keep returning to, because you can't fake it and you can't plan it. He says the first thing he did before he zoomed in, before he understood what he was looking at, before he could have explained anything to anyone, was look up from the screen, across the kitchen, to the window that faces the tree line. He checked the tree line. His body knew before his mind did. 40 years of instincts did the math faster than his eyes could, and the answer those instincts produced wasn't, "What an interesting photograph." It was, "It's out there right now." He didn't say anything that night. He sat at that table while the screen light went off and the house made its evening noises around him. And he scrolled the burst back and forth, back and forth. And he says the strangest part was how quiet his own head went. No panic, no excitement, just a low, cold rearranging. The feeling of a man watching 40 years of certainty get repossessed in real time. And then he did something that tells you everything about him. He didn't post it. He didn't text a buddy. He didn't even wake his wife. He put the card in a Ziploc bag and he put the bag in the toolbox in the bed of his truck outside the house. When I asked him weeks later why the truck, he was quiet for a second and then said, "It felt wrong having it under the same roof as the kids. Like it was contaminated. Like the knowing itself was the dangerous thing." Hold on to that thought. This whole story comes back to it at the end. He carried it alone for 9 days. 9 days of coffee at that table with the tree line in the corner of his eye. 9 days of walking to the truck in the morning a little differently. He didn't notice he was doing it. We'll get to who did notice. 9 days of lying in the dark doing arithmetic he couldn't stop. The camera is 400 yards out. At the stride in those frames, that's under 4 minutes of easy walking from the kid's bedroom window. On day 10, he showed his wife. We'll get to that too. That's its own moment, and it deserves its own moment. And on day 11, at 1 a.m, he created an email account that didn't have his name in it, attached the burst, and sent us 3 sentences. Not, "Is this real?" Not, "What's it worth?" Read his sentences again. "I just need someone to tell me what this is." That's not curiosity. That's a man asking for a field guide to his own backyard. So that's what this video is now. We spent 2 weeks trying to build Daniel that field guide, digging through 50 years of witness accounts, researcher files, and the quiet testimony of rural families who claim to have lived beside this thing for decades. What we found changed how I think about this entire subject. But before any of that lore means anything, you need to know what Daniel told me on our 3rd call, late at night, with the house asleep around him. Because it turns out the photograph wasn't the beginning of this story, it was the end of 7 years of it. He just hadn't been keeping count. "I need to tell you some things I never told anybody," he said, "because they were never worth telling." And then for an hour, he walked me through 7 years. I'm going to give them to you the way he gave them to me, in order, each one with the explanation he used at the time. Because every single one of these has a perfectly reasonable explanation. That's the entire point. And here's what I'm going to do differently than Daniel could. After each one, I'm going to tell you what 50 years of witness accounts say about it. Because Daniel was experiencing these things in isolation, one practical explanation at a time. He had no idea he was working his way through a checklist. 7 years ago, the knocks, late October, dusk, elk season. Daniel's sitting against a stump glassing a meadow when a sound rolls across the valley, a sharp, resonant knock, wood on wood, loud. 10 seconds later, a second knock answers from the opposite ridge. 2 points, half a mile apart, talking to each other. His explanation, hunters. Some guys signal that way, banging a branch on a trunk. Perfectly reasonable, except Daniel parked at the only trailhead serving that drainage, and his was the only truck there at dusk and the only truck at full dark. What the accounts say, this is, by sheer volume, one of the most reported phenomena in the entire literature. Witnesses across every state, across decades, describe the same thing. Percussive wood knocks at dawn and dusk, often in call and response pairs across valleys. Researchers who've spent decades on this consider it communication, position checks, the way wolves howl to locate each other. 2 knocks answering across a valley isn't one of something. It's 2 of something, coordinating. Daniel heard that 7 years ago and drove home thinking about hunters who didn't exist. 5 years ago, the smell. A windless evening in late summer on the same game trail the camera now watches. Daniel walks into it like walking into a wall, a stench he still can't properly describe. Wet dog, he says, but under it sulfur, and under that something like rot. So dense and so located that he physically stopped. 60 paces later, the air was just forest again, pine and dust. The smell had edges. His explanation, a carcass in the brush. The woods are full of death. Except he hunted that trail all autumn and never found one. Never saw a raven work the area, never heard coyotes on it, and a dead thing big enough to make that wall of stink rings the dinner bell for every scavenger on the mountain. What the accounts say, the smell is so consistent across reports that old-timers in the South had a name for the creature built around it. The skunk ape. Wet dog, sulfur, rot, appearing suddenly, vanishing suddenly on windless days. Some researchers think it's like a gorilla's fear musk, released, not constant, which would explain the single strangest feature of Daniel's experience. Smells don't have edges, unless something is making the smell standing in one place, very close while you walk past it. Daniel went pale when I told him that part. because he'd walk past it both directions 60 paces apart. Whatever made that wall of scent, he was inside arm's reach distance of it twice, on an evening he remembers as boring. 4 years ago, the saplings, June up near the ridgeline. He finds a line of young trees snapped not one, a series over 30 or 40 yards, each broken at roughly the same height. He stood next to one. The break was well above his head, 8 feet, maybe more, all laid over the same direction, like combed hair. His explanation, snow load. Wet snow snapped saplings all the time. In February. This was June. The breaks were green and fresh, and snow doesn't break trees in a row at 8 feet and comb them all one way. He took a picture on his phone to show a buddy, never showed him. We have the picture, the timestamp checks out. What the accounts say, tree breaks and twists at heights no human can reach without a ladder show up constantly in the field reports. And the running theory among researchers splits 2 ways: territorial marking or trail marking. Either a "this is mine" or a "this way." Both interpretations agree on one thing: it's deliberate. And here's the detail that matters for Daniel. Those breaks were near the ridgeline dead end, the useless end of a trail that no game uses as a through route. We'll come back to that trail. It's the spine of this whole story. 3 years ago, the dog. They had a dog, a hunting breed, 10 years with the family. The kind of dog that backed black bears off the property twice and never took a backward step in its life. And one autumn, that dog stopped going into the trees. Not gradually. 1 week it was the dog it had always been. The next it would walk to where the mowed grass meets the tree line, plant its feet and growl. Low, sustained, at nothing, at an empty wall of timber. Every evening, most of that autumn, you could throw its training dummy into the brush, the dummy it would have swum a frozen river for, and it would look at the brush, look at Daniel, and not go. His explanation, a cougar moving through. Cats do that. Dogs know before people do. Except it went on for almost 3 months, and no cougar parks in one drainage for 3 months without leaving a single track or taking a single deer. And Daniel looked because the dog's behavior bothered him more than he ever admitted out loud. Then one day in early winter, the dog walked into the tree line like nothing had ever been wrong. Like a switch flipped, like whatever it was had moved on, or like the dog had concluded something it had no way to say. What the accounts say, dogs are all over this literature, and the pattern is heartbreakingly consistent. Dogs sense it long before people do, and dogs that respect it, that hold a line, growl from distance, refuse the woods, are fine. We'll get to what happens to the other kind of dog later in this video, and Daniel's reaction when he heard it. The old dog died last spring by the wood stove. Old age, a good death after a good life. Daniel told me, and it's the only moment in all our calls where his voice went somewhere I'm not going to try to describe. I keep thinking about what that dog knew. He spent a whole fall trying to tell me. I patted his head and went inside. 2 years ago, the Rock, late afternoon, half a mile from the house, field dressing a deer, hands busy, mind quiet, good day. And the canopy behind him erupts, branches snapping in sequence, top to bottom, something heavy coming down through a tree, and a rock the size of a loaf of bread hits the duff 30 feet away, hard enough to bounce. He stood and turned a full, slow circle with the knife in his hand. Nothing. The forest holding its breath the way it does. And about that rock, there's no cliff above that spot. No slope it could roll from and get airborne. Rocks don't climb trees and wait. For a rock to come down through canopy, something has to carry it up or throw it high and hard from somewhere unseen. His explanation, he laughed telling me, a laugh with nothing in it, was, weird stuff happens in the woods. He packed that deer out at a pace he's never matched since, skipped that drainage for a season, and then being a reasonable man talked himself back into it. Reasonable men always talk themselves back in. What the accounts say, rock throwing is one of the most documented behaviors in the entire field. And here's what almost nobody outside the research community knows. It's not an attack. In hundreds of reports of thrown rocks, near misses vastly outnumber hits, and the pattern reads like intent. The rocks land close. They almost never land on. Researchers read it as displacement behavior. The message isn't die, the message is leave. Which means 2 years ago, something watched Daniel kneel over a fresh kill on its ground, decided he was too close to something, the kill, a root, something else, and told him so. And he heard it. He just didn't know the language. 18 months ago, the picnic, the last one, I asked him to repeat it twice. A Sunday, early autumn. The whole family at the wide spot by the creek, the swimming hole, the fire ring the kids built. A perfect, ordinary afternoon. On the walk home, his youngest, 5 at the time, is riding his shoulders and says, in that bored, factual voice kids reserve for things that are simply true, "The big man was watching us again." Daniel says, "What big man, buddy?" And the kid says, "The big man in the trees. He doesn't come close, he just watches." And then asked if they could have hot dogs. Again, he said again. Daniel laughed, because of course he laughed. A 5-year-old, an imaginary friend, woods full of man-shaped shadows. His wife didn't laugh. He remembers that now. She looked back down the trail for one long second and then changed the subject, and they never spoke of it again. Married people have an entire language made of things they decide not to bring up. What the accounts say, and I debated even including this because it's the part of the literature that unsettles me most. Children come up constantly. Witnesses kids reporting a big man, a monkey man, a shadow friend at the woodline, sometimes for months before any adult sees anything. The researcher's explanation is mundane and somehow worse for it. Kids spend more time looking at the woods than we do, lower to the ground, with no filter telling them what they're allowed to see. Kids don't explain things away. That's a skill we teach them later. He doesn't come close, he just watches. A 5-year-old gave Daniel a complete, accurate behavioral profile 18 months before the camera did, and got hot dogs. Now line it all up. Knox answered across an empty valley, a wall of smell with edges. Saplings broken at 8 feet in June near the dead end of a trail nothing uses. A fearless dog that spent one autumn guarding a line in the grass. A rock from an empty sky that landed close but not on. A child's big man who watches and doesn't come close. 7 years, 6 events. Each one alone is nothing, and I mean that each one has a rational explanation, and Daniel took the rational explanation every single time because that is what reasonable people do. It's what you'd have done, it's what I'd have done. But stacked in order, they're not nothing. Stacked in order, they're a textbook. They are, almost point for point, the standard escalation pattern described in 50 years of long-term witness accounts. The signature of what researchers call a habituation site, a place where one of these things doesn't pass through, a place where it lives. The photograph didn't create Daniel's fear. It connected 7 years of dots he had carefully, sensibly refused to connect in one frame, in 1 second, at his own kitchen table. And before we go on, how many of you in the last 10 minutes went somewhere specific in your own memory? A knock you explained away, a smell with edges, a dog that wouldn't go where it had gone 100 times. Put it in the comments. I read every one of them. Maybe you were right to explain it away. Probably you were. Probably. So Daniel asked us his question, "Tell me what this is." And we did the only honest thing we could do. We went into the accounts, not the headlines, not the blurry photo clickbait, the deep file, 50+ years of witness reports, the field notes of researchers who've spent entire careers on this, and the rarest material of all, the quiet, reluctant testimony of rural families who claim to have lived alongside this thing for years and never wanted a dime or a camera crew for it. I want to be straight with you before I open this file. None of this is science. It can't be. You cannot do science on an animal that officially does not exist. What this is pattern. Thousands of independent reports across decades and continents and cultures that never spoke to each other, describing the same behaviors in the same situations. Pattern isn't proof. But pattern is information, and Daniel needed information, and frankly, after 2 weeks inside this file, so did I. Because the thing the pattern describes is not the thing from the movies. It's stranger, more disciplined, and in a way I'll try to explain, more unsettling. Here's the behavior file, as best as 50 years of testimony can write it. 1. It is nocturnal, and it keeps hours. The overwhelming majority of close-range activity in the long-term accounts happens in a window, roughly midnight to 4 in the morning, with a hot zone right around 2 to 3. Daniel's burst fired at 2:04. Witnesses who live near activity describe it like a shift. The same hours, night after night, season after season, whatever it is, it commutes. 2, it walks routes and it walks boundaries. This is the one that reframed Daniel's entire property for him. Long-term accounts don't describe random wandering. They describe circuits, fixed routes, walked on a schedule, often along edges, creek bottoms, ridge lines, fence lines, the seam where field meets timber. Researchers who've mapped sighting clusters describe what look like patrol loops around a core area. Now think about Daniel's trail. It climbs to a ridgeline and dead ends. No water up there, no feed, no through route. He's hunted that ground for decades and confirms no game uses it to get anywhere because it doesn't go anywhere. As an animal's travel route, it's useless. There's exactly one thing the trail is good for. It runs parallel to the edge of his property, keeping the timber between itself and the house for almost a quarter mile. The route only makes sense if the route is the point. His camera isn't on a game trail. It never was. It's on a fence line, just not one that humans built. 3. It is curious about us at a fixed distance. This might be the most consistent finding in the entire file, and it's the exact opposite of the monster movie. The long accounts describe surveillance, not stalking. It watches houses. It watches people working outside, kids playing, lights in windows, from cover, from distance, sometimes for years. Families and habituation accounts describe the feeling of being watched as simply a feature of their property, like weather. And the distance holds. Whatever buffer it sets, it keeps. Decades of watching in the long accounts, and the buffer holds. He doesn't come close, he just watches. A 5-year-old said it. 50 years of files say it. The same sentence. 4, it learns objects. Specifically, it learns cameras. Here's a statistic that should be impossible. There are millions of trail cameras strapped to trees across North America right now, and the number of clear, full-body images like Daniel's can be counted without taking off your shoes. Skeptics say that's because there's nothing to photograph, and that's a fair argument, and here's the other one. Game cameras are not invisible. They click, they have scent, infrared units glow faintly red in the dark, visible to plenty of animals. Researchers who run camera lines report a maddening pattern. Activity all around the cameras, tracks in front of them, knocks behind them, and empty frames. Some report cameras turned, angled down, or simply gone. Now, Daniel's camera has two modes, infrared and old-fashioned white flash. He'd run it for years on infrared. Months ago, after a battery change, he set it wrong without realizing. So the one night we have pictures is the one night the camera betrayed itself completely. A wall of white light, point blank, burst after burst. And the figure in those frames does not startle, doesn't freeze, doesn't whirl, doesn't bolt. It keeps its pace, keeps its scanning rhythm, gives one long, sidelong look, not at the lens, around it, past it, and walks on. A deer that camera flashed at 1:44 that same night blew out of the frame and didn't use the trail for 6 days. The 7-foot figure treated a strobe in the dark as old news. There are two explanations. Either it doesn't care about sudden lights, which would make it unlike every wild animal on that mountain, or it wasn't surprised because the camera was not new information. You don't startle at a thing you've already mapped. And when Daniel went back through his old SD cards, he doesn't wipe them, he rotates them through a drawer. He found 2 prior events he'd dismissed at the time. 2 separate nights, months apart, both in the 2 to 3 window. Camera triggered, full burst, empty frames, the trail, the stones, the fur, and no visible source for the motion that woke it. He'd blamed wind. But a camera's trigger zone is a cone, and the edge of the cone is exactly where something tall could pass if it had learned. Maybe by one bad night with a flash years ago, where the invisible line was. 5. It communicates, and it escalates in order. The file describes a vocabulary. Wood knocks for contact and position. Rock throws as messages, near misses, almost never hits. Leave, not die. Vocalizations, howls, whoops, and in the worst accounts, a scream people never get over. And the escalation is ordered. The long-term accounts describe a ladder. First you're watched and never know it, then signs, knocks, smells, breaks, then displays, the rock, the scream, if you push into the wrong place at the wrong time. Actual aggression sits at the top of the ladder, and the accounts where it's reached almost always have a human hand on the lower rungs first, which brings us to the last entry and the one that matters most for a man with 3 kids. 6. The trouble starts when people change the arrangement. Across the habituation literature, the dark turns, the screaming at the house walls, the shoulder against the shed at 3 a.m., the families that finally broke and fled, overwhelmingly begin the same way. A human closed the distance first, food left out, gifts on a stump, playing recorded calls at the tree line, trying to follow it, trying to film it, trying to make friends with it. The buffer, the file says over and over, is the peace. The thing maintains its side of the buffer with what you can only call discipline. The accounts that end badly are the ones where a person didn't. So assemble the profile because Daniel asked us what this is, and this is the honest composite of 50 years of testimony. Nocturnal, territorial, a creature of roots and schedules. Curious about us to the point of long-term surveillance and disciplined about distance to the point of doctrine. Smart enough to map a camera's blind cone. Possessed of a signal vocabulary it expects you to understand. Patient beyond any animal we have a category for. And this is the strangest line in the whole file, restrained. 7 feet and several hundred pounds of restraint, exercised nightly, a few hundred yards from sleeping children, for what now looks like at least 7 years. I'll say the quiet part. That profile is not an animal. Animals don't keep doctrine. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I don't know what it is, and I've never been more comfortable saying that. But when I finished assembling that file, I understood why the old peoples of the Pacific Northwest, who shared that ground with it for 10,000 years before any of us arrived, didn't file it under animals either. They filed it under neighbors. The kind you respect, the kind you don't provoke, and the kind you do not visit. Daniel read the file, all of it, and his response was one sentence, and the sentence is the whole second half of this video. Okay, so it has rules. Now what are mine? Because here's what the file couldn't tell him, what no file on earth can tell him. The file is written by people describing it from a distance. Nobody writes the manual for Daniel's actual position. It lives here, I cannot leave, I cannot speak, and I have 3 children who think the forest is still theirs. That position, it turns out, is its own kind of wilderness, and it's time I showed you around it. The obvious response, the one everyone reaches for first, the one half of you typed into the comments 20 minutes ago, fits in one word: leave. I said it to him myself on our second call. Gently. The way you float an idea you assume a man has already had. There was a silence, and then Daniel laughed, a laugh with absolutely nothing in it, and said, "With what?" So let's talk about with what, because this is the part the monster movies never show. And it's the part that turned this story for me from a curiosity into something I think about when I'm trying to fall asleep. You already know the house isn't just a house. Inherited ground, 3 generations, owned outright, the load-bearing wall of the entire family economy. The garden that fills the pantry, the woodlot that heats the house, the elk in the freezer that Daniel describes, without a shred of poetry, as a quarter of our protein for the year. Remove the house, and the math of 5 people on one tradesman's paycheck doesn't bend. It snaps. Fine, sell it. Sure, sell it to whom? And here Daniel said the thing I haven't been able to shake since. He said, picture the family that buys it. They've got kids too. The kids are excited about the creek. Do I tell them? If I tell them, who buys it? And if I don't tell them? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. There is a version of selling that consists of lying to a family with children about what walks their new property line at 2 a.m, and Daniel has discovered he is not capable of it. And honestly, the fact that he's not capable of it is half of why I believe everything else he's told me. And even in the fantasy, full price tomorrow, a buyer who asks nothing, run the numbers because he has, at 1 a.m, more times than his wife knows. Rent in town for 5 people. The commute to where the work is, 3 kids out of the only school they've known. Starting over at 42 with whatever survives the sale in a market where whatever survives doesn't buy back 1/10 of what they had. Leaving isn't a decision, leaving is a demolition. You do not demolish your family's life over a photograph, even this photograph. Okay, says everyone watching, then don't run, cash in. That footage is worth real money. TV, documentaries, licensing. Let the attention fund the move. Daniel considered this for exactly 1 evening, and then he made a list. An actual handwritten list of what going public costs. He read it to me over the phone, and I'm going to give it to you line by line because his list is better than any argument I could write. Line 1. The town? It's small. The terrain in those frames means nothing to you, but it is not anonymous to anyone who's hunted that drainage. The moment this footage gets a county attached to it, there are men at the diner who will name that trail by Friday. Out there, anonymity has a half-life of about a week. Line 2. The job. Daniel works with his hands on a crew for a practical company in a practical industry. There's no policy against being the Bigfoot guy. There doesn't need to be. He has watched over 20 years what happens to men who become a story, any story. They don't get fired, they get managed, passed over for the good crews, smiled at. They become the punchline that enters the room before they do. His words, I've got 15 years of being taken seriously. It's the only savings account I've got. 1 news segment and it's empty. Line 3, the one he underlined twice. The circus, because Daniel did his homework. He looked up the people who went public before him, the families, and he found the same pattern repeating across decades like a curse. TV vans on the county road, trespassers, not gentle ones, men with rifles and drones and night vision climbing fences at 3 a.m. to get their own footage of his backyard. True believers camping on the property line, knocking on the door, wanting to compare experiences. And the debunkers, somehow crueler than all of them, who don't stop at calling you a liar. They call your children liars, at school, online, forever. At the end of that evening, Daniel closed the laptop and said the sentence that is, for me, the center of this entire story. I've thought about it every day since. The thing in the woods hasn't hurt my family, the internet would. Sit with that. A man holding maybe the clearest evidence of its kind ever captured has concluded, after 7 years of signs and one photograph, that the 7-foot figure on his trail camera is less dangerous to his children than the audience is, than we are, you and me. And the longer I sit with it, the less sure I am that he's wrong. So, can't leave, can't speak. Which leaves the door he's actually living behind stay and say nothing and manage it. And I need to show you what managing it looks like. Because this is where the story stops being about Daniel and becomes about 3 kids who have no idea any of this is happening. 11 days after the photograph, the forest closed. All of it. No hikes, no creek, no fort, no crossing the tree line. A total overnight ban with no reason attached, because the reason is the one thing he cannot say. And think about enforcing a rule like that. For the first week, because I said so, held, the way it always holds, briefly. But kids are scientists, they probe the fence. The 8-year-old cried at dinner and called him unfair, and Daniel sat there and took it, because the alternative was the truth. The 6-year-old, the one who met the big man and found him boring, asks every few days with a kid's terrible patience when they're going to the creek. When, but actually when. And Daniel pays out the rope of soon and we'll see, and the rope is getting short and he knows it. But it's the oldest who scares him. 11, smart. Old enough to notice the rule arrived overnight with no story attached. Old enough to notice, and this is the detail that got me, that Dad checks the kitchen window now, that Dad walks to the truck differently in the morning, kids read us like weather, the boy knows the pressure dropped, he just can't find the storm. And last week, Daniel found the boy's bike dropped in the grass at the edge of the yard, at the line, the exact line the old dog used to guard, and the boy standing just inside the tree's long afternoon shadow looking up the trail. Just looking, he said. Every parent watching this just felt their stomach drop. Because every parent knows that species of sentence. Just looking is how it starts. The ban has made the forest mysterious, and mystery is gravity to an 11-year-old. Daniel knows with the certainty of a man who was once 11 with a forest of his own and a father with rules that there is a version of some Saturday this summer where the 3 of them slip out. To the swimming hole, to the fort, sun on the water, nothing wrong with the world, kids on ground they've known their whole lives. The same ground something else has known longer. And here's where the behavior file comes back like a knife. Remember what the account said keeps people safe. Noise, daylight, groups, predictability. The family that hikes loud on a Saturday afternoon is, by 50 years of testimony, close to the safest thing in those woods. And remember what the account said about the encounters that go wrong. Quiet, alone, moving like prey. Now look at what Daniel's ban is manufacturing. Not a loud family on a sunlit trail, a solitary 11-year-old sneaking, quiet, off the known paths because the known paths are watched from the kitchen window. the band built to keep his son away from it is engineering the exact encounter the file warns about. The fence is creating the trespasser. He knows this. I told him because I had to, and he was quiet for a long time and then said, "Yeah, I'd worked that out." That's the kind of trap this is. It's not a trap because he can't see the doors. It's a trap because he can see all of them, and everyone leads back into the room. Tell them the truth, then. The last door. He stands in front of it every day, and every day he doesn't open it. And here's his reasoning, and I dare you to fault it. Open that door, and two things happen with certainty. First, their childhood in that house ends. Not their safety, their childhood. The forest out every window stops being where this family is rich and becomes the thing you check from the kitchen, the way he does, forever. You cannot untell an 8-year-old that. And second, it leaks immediately. An 11-year-old cannot carry the most extraordinary secret in the county and shouldn't have to. It's out by the weekend, and then the entire list, line 1 through line 3, pulls into the driveway anyway. Telling his kids and telling the internet are the same act with a fuse on it. So the lie holds the family together, and the lie is pulling it apart. And both of those are true at once, which is what a trap is. And then there's his wife. Day 10. He took the phone out to the kitchen after the kids were down. He'd moved the images onto it from the card in the truck and held it across the table. She looked at the frames, all of them, in silence for a long time, the longest time. And then she handed the phone back and said one word: delete it. Not what is it, not is it real, not oh my God, delete it. And they have not spoken about it since, not because the subject is closed, but because it is so open that neither of them can stand near the edge of it. She has chosen, with full knowledge, to live as if the photograph does not exist. And before anyone in the comments calls that denial, think harder. She did the same math he did instantly at that table. Can't leave, can't speak, can't tell the kids. She just got to the end of the maze faster than he did and chose the only remaining door he hadn't considered. Refuse the knowledge, carry the house, the kids, the dinners, the ordinary blessed life, and let him carry the card in the truck. They orbit it now, this enormous silence with a shape in it. He checks the window. She watches him check it and says nothing. Married people have a whole language of things they decide not to bring up. Theirs now includes a 7-foot entry. So here it is. The question I promised you in the first 2 minutes. We've arrived. You are Daniel, not movie you. Actual you, your actual bank account, your actual job, your actual people who depend on you. The house you can't afford to leave. The footage you can't afford to show. The kids you can't tell, who are one boring Saturday from crossing the line on their own. The spouse who said, delete it. The tree line out the kitchen window and 4 minutes of easy walking between it and the bedrooms. What do? I'm not asking rhetorically. Put it in the comments, everyone gets read, but more than that, actually answer it in your own head, honestly, before this video ends. Because I have spent 2 weeks trying to answer it in his shoes, and I want to report my results. Every plan I build collapses by the 3rd step. Leave. With what? Speak and feed your family to what follows? Tell the kids and end something you can never give back and it leaks anyway? Stay silent and stand at that window every evening holding a secret with a 7-foot shadow on it, hoping 50 years of mostly holds? Every door out of the room leads back into the room. The best answer I found, my honest one, is the one Daniel had already reached before his email ever found us, which told me how thoroughly he'd walked the maze. You stay, you hold the line, and you learn the rules, its rules, better than anyone has ever bothered to learn them, which is what he's doing. And in the last part of this story, I'll show you the arrangement he's built, and then I have to tell you about the message we got 3 days ago, right before we locked this edit, because something has changed on that trail. Here is where Daniel has landed as of our last full call. Not the right answer, I don't know what the right answer is, and I no longer believe one exists. But you asked what you would do, and this is what one real man with everything actually on the line has actually done. He calls it, with a hunter's total lack of drama, the arrangement. Rule 1, the buffer is sacred. Nothing from his side ever closes the distance. No food out, ever. The bird feeders came down, the dog food. There's no dog, but habit. Bin moved to the garage, the deer gut piles now buried instead of left. No gifts, no recordings, no following sign, no investigating. The file was unanimous. The buffer is the peace, and every account that turned dark started with a human hand reaching across it. Daniel's hands stay home. Rule 2, he keeps its schedule. The camera stays up, moved, re-aimed, and set correctly this time to no-glow infrared. I asked him why not just take it down. His wife asked the same thing. His answer was simple and I think bulletproof. I'd rather know than not know. Whatever walks that line, Daniel intends to be its bookkeeper. Every card pull is logged now, date, time, temperature, moon. A hunter patterning the thing that, it turns out, has spent 7 years patterning him. Rule 3, the family gets loud. This is the file's gift, and it's the one piece of genuinely good news in this entire story. The accounts are clear. Noise, daylight, groups, predictability, that's the safe shape for humans in these woods. So the forest is reopening, one supervised, deliberately loud piece at a time. The whole family, Saturday afternoons, a radio in the day pack, voices up, the creek, but not past the creek. The fort is being renovated, relocated, officially as an upgrade to the meadow side of the property, away from the trail side. And the kids believe it was their idea, which is its own small masterpiece of fatherhood. Rule 4, the oldest gets the truth in installments, not the photograph, the skills. Weekends at the range now, father and son, shooting, gun safety, and starting this summer, tracking again. A substitute ritual to fill the hole where the forest was. That's the official version. The real version, which Daniel never said out loud and didn't need to, he is quietly, methodically preparing his son for the day he can't be standing between him and the tree line. That's not paranoia. That's what fathers have done about the dark for 100,000 years. It just usually isn't this specific. Rule 5, and he was almost embarrassed telling me this one. Respect. Not fear, he's been very clear that what he feels has stopped being fear exactly. When he's on his own ground now, at the woodpile, at the truck, he doesn't sneak and he doesn't peer. He moves like a man at home because the file says that's what the long-term families do. And because, he says, if it's been watching this property for 7 years, it watched my kids grow up. It's had 1,000 chances. It's taken none of them. I figure it decided something about us a long time ago. I'm not going to be the one who changes its mind. Hold on to that sentence. It might be the wisest thing anyone has ever said about this subject, and it came from a man who, 2 months ago, didn't believe in it. That's the arrangement. Hold the buffer, keep the books, stay loud, train the boy, show respect. It is, and tell me I'm wrong, almost exactly the set of customs the oldest peoples of that coast kept toward the same forests for 10,000 years. Daniel reinvented them from scratch in 11 days at a kitchen table, because nothing in the modern world was willing to teach him. Every institution he could have called has one answer that doesn't exist, and you cannot get a pamphlet for managing a thing that officially does not exist. He is, as far as the entire architecture of official knowledge is concerned, a man with no problem at all. And that was the end of this video. We had the edit nearly locked. And then, 3 days ago, as a courtesy, we messaged Daniel one last time before publication to confirm he was still comfortable and ask if anything had changed. Something had changed. 2 new trigger events since our last call, both in the dead window between 2 and 3 in the morning. The first, an empty frame. The trail, the stones, the big fur, nothing. The same disciplined nothing as the old cards. The cone-edged nothing. Business as usual, the bookkeeper logged it. The second one is not empty. I have not seen it. I want to be completely straight with you. He has not sent it. He says he is not ready to. And we are not going to pressure a man we've spent an hour asking you to care about. But he described it in writing, and I'm going to read you his message word for word because I've read it about 40 times and it rearranges slightly every time. Far right of frame, edge of the IR wash, right against the big tree. The camera caught the back of it leaving. The back of it, leaving. Think about what a camera is. A camera doesn't record what happens. It records the instant something moves enough to wake it, which means everything before that frame is invisible, and in everything before that frame, it was not crossing on its route, left to right, on its schedule, at its distance. It was at the tree, stationary, facing the camera. For how long, the camera cannot say. The camera only knows when it left. 7 years of signs, a route walked like doctrine, a buffer kept with discipline. And now, 11 days after a white flash betrayed its existence to the man in the house, it stood at the tree that hides the camera in the dark, doing the one thing the entire file says it does best, watching back. Daniel's arrangement hasn't changed. The camera stays, the books stay open. But he added one line to his last message after the description, and I'll give you that too because it's the last thing we've heard from him. I don't think it minds the camera. I think it wanted me to know we're even. If he sends us that image when he's ready, if he's ever ready, you will see it here first. That's not a tease. That's a promise we made to him, and now I've made it to you. Let me leave you with what I actually believe after 2 weeks inside this story. The real horror here was never the figure on the trail camera. Go back to the start of this video and look at those frames one more time, and I think they look different now, like I promised. The bent knee walk, the scanning head, the gray, tired face. Whatever that is, flesh or fabric, real or the quietest hoax in history, the thing in those frames has rules. It keeps a schedule, holds a buffer, and has exercised 7 feet of restraint. Nightly, a few hundred yards from sleeping children for at least 7 years. By every standard we use to judge a neighbor, it has been a better one than most. The real horror is on our side of the tree line. A father in the modern world is holding what might be the clearest photograph of its kind ever taken, and there's no number to call. No agency, no hotline, no ranger pamphlet, no expert who won't laugh at him, no platform that won't devour him. Every institution we built to stand between a family and the dark offers Daniel the same sentence. That doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, neither does his problem, and neither in a way does he. He is alone at a kitchen window, running nightly risk assessments on a threat he is not permitted to have, while the rest of us debate pixels in a comment section. The forest is just a forest, says every official voice. Nothing to see. Move along. But Daniel knows what walks through it at 2 a.m. And now, so do you. So the clearest footage anyone has ever captured? Or the most elaborate quiet hoax I've personally ever reviewed? Built for no audience, sold for no money, by a man whose one request was to be hidden? You've heard everything we could verify and everything we couldn't. Real or fake, you decide. That has always been the deal on this channel, and I won't break it tonight. But before you vote, do one thing. Answer his question, not mine. You're at the kitchen table. The card is in your hand. The kids are arguing about hot dogs in the next room, and the tree line is out the window, going dark. What do? Put it in the comments and read the others while you're down there, because somebody in that thread has thought of something you haven't. And maybe, given how many of you are watching and how many trail cameras are strapped to how many quiet trees tonight, somebody down there isn't answering a hypothetical at all. Maybe their card just hasn't been pulled yet. Subscribe if you want to be here when Daniel sends the second image. And tonight, before you turn off the lights, check the tree line.